Okay, I said we would like to continue on time because we still have a lot of program to cover, and we all would like to be mindful of the time and those ones watching it via webcast. The next section is the so-called who. So we will particularly focus on the different roles involved and on training. The first thing that we would like to share is the Umoja Governance structure. It's more for your information. So there is something being called the Umoja Steering Committee. The Umoja Steering Committee is being chaired by the project owner, the Undersecretary General of Department of Management, Mr. Takasu, and all the process owners that Jürgen introduced earlier are part of this Umoja Steering Committee, and the key decisions are being made in this Umoja Steering Committee, as for instance the rollout timeline of the different entities. In addition to this central governance structure, there is a local, what we call a deployment support structure. So for each major hub, like New York, Geneva, Vienna, Nairobi, there is a deployment coordinator and a coordination team in those hubs that coordinate all those activities that are required in order to go live, and they build the interlink to the Umoja team and order to the so-called business readiness managers. The business readiness managers work for the different process owners and build the interface to the entities. The next picture shows you the different target groups that we try to address with the Umoja Academy. As said when we did the first deployments, we mainly focused on end-user training, and based on lessons learned, then in March last year, the Umoja Academy was initiated, and the Umoja Academy now introduces additional training on top of end-user training. So you can see different boxes. The blue box on the left-hand side is the manager training, and on the right-hand side we have the so-called Umoja experts training. In terms of manager training, we differentiate between 3 different tracks. So the first one is called A1. This is targeting USGs and ASGs, and as Jürgen said, this same presentation, this is part of this session for the USGs and ASGs. In addition, there is the A2 track for what we call middle managers. These are usually the managers on the director level. We had already all the sessions here in Nairobi in December, and all the yesterday for the UNEP directors. Then we have sessions that are called A3. So the target group of the A3 sessions are the what we call the line managers. So those ones that have the staff in their team, and for those ones we offer a one-day training program, and for instance the training program that we do today, as Jürgen mentioned, we also offer additional of 1 or 2 trainings per function area. So if you're particularly interested in one of those areas, then you can also attend further training. In addition, we built the so-called Umoja experts, and the Umoja experts are really, really important, particularly going back to what we discussed earlier in terms of having a good support structure in place at the day of go live. We had so many questions when we went live with peacekeeping, and our central team in New York was just basically not able to cope with all these questions because the number is far too high. So therefore we need to also build more local expertise, and this is also to the benefit of you, because if you have some expertise locally, then you will far easier and faster get a response to your questions. And typically the nature of 70-80% of the questions are how-to in nature. So it's not that there is a real need for a system reconfiguration or for an expert screening. Often it's just what is the next click in order to get to the next screen, and those ones can be usually done locally. So now having a look in more detail on those different Umoja experts, we have the so-called process experts, local process experts, and business intelligence power users. First, let's try to focus on what a process expert is and what is a local process expert. Process experts are the key people that shape how the processes are defined in the system, but all in the policies to the overall benefit of the business strategy. So process experts are typically not people that transact on a daily basis in the system. It's rather those masterminds that conceptualize processes, that introduce change, that review policies, guidelines, things like that. Whereas local process experts are daily transactional users in the system, and they are considered as the most qualified users. So these are the kind of go-to persons. If you don't know what the next click and the next step is, you would reach out to a local process expert. So in that sense, a local process expert, they are all the end users, but they are somehow the most qualified ones that we all need in order to provide support. And it's not only that we need them to provide support after go live. Local process experts are all of those ones that are heavily involved now in the realization phase in order to accomplish all the different realization activities. We talked earlier about testing, data conversion, training. These are things that are being supported by local process experts. Local process experts are all of the key players when it comes to training of end users. So the Umoja team in New York does not have the capacity to train all end users. Training of end users is being done by local process experts. So basically a subset of the local process experts is being nominated then to become the trainers of the end users. So in that sense, the local process experts are being nominated from the entities. It's in the own interest of the entities to nominate the right number and profiles of local process experts and trainers, because this will also then determine the number and quality of the end user training. In addition, we have the so-called business intelligence power users or analysts. Business intelligence users, these are the ones that will have full access to the business intelligence system in order to analyze all the data that we put into the system. So this is a very, very important role as well, because the main purpose and benefit of the system is transparency and efficiency, and business intelligence is the key to reach and to get access to this transparency and drive efficiency. So therefore we need those business intelligence power users to drive this data analysis. As you can also see on this chart, there's a close relationship across those different groups. So we can see that the experts are supposed to collaborate and advise the management. For instance, providing the BI power users are providing reports to the managers and so on. The managers are supposed to supervise and consult the end users, and then the experts are supposed to train and support the end users. So by that you can see we need to train all these different target groups properly with a tailored program, and only if we do this properly then we will be in a position that we have a very good setup when we go live, so that everyone has sufficient knowledge of the new way of working. In terms of roles and responsibilities, I captured most of them, so this is just a summary slide where you can see what the key responsibilities are per role. As I said, we just covered it already orally, so I will not go through this again, but we will share those slides so you can also have a look at it again. In terms of the sequence of training, what we usually try to stick to is that we start with the manager training from top, so to get first the senior managers buy-in. So we start off usually having an A1, then A2 and A3 session. Here in Nairobi we already did A2 and A3 sessions back in December. Today is just another opportunity, because we in December we were informed that a lot of you didn't have time to attend because it was quite on a short notice, so we said okay, we redo this session. But we already did a lot of those sessions back in December. In addition, then there's it's usually followed by local process expert training. This is a 2 to 3 week classroom training. But for local process expert, it doesn't end with the classroom training. As said, they will be involved into a lot of further activities like testing, data conversion, and so on. A subset of those local process experts will go to a training which is called Train the Trainer, or TTT. These Train the Trainer programs will now start next week. So we already did a lot of those local process expert training here in Nairobi, and now we start off going to the next step, which is the Train the Trainer. And right after the Train the Trainer, end user training will start. So in that sense, you can see this is closely followed by train the trainer. For instance, next week there will be train the trainer on source to acquire, funds management and grants management. And by the time we complete this training and have trainers ready, then end user training can start in those functional areas. The process expert and BI power user training are not in the same sequence. They are a little bit of a different nature. The process expert training is not a formal training. It's a hands-on body system training where you are assigned with a mentor, and this usually takes months or even a year to reach the level of a process expert, and it's although only for a few individuals. And in terms of business intelligence power user training, we now start a first pilot in March, but business intelligence becomes more relevant after go live, because you first need to transact in the system and feed the system with data, and only after a certain period of time you will have enough data in the system so that it really makes sense to start running business intelligence. So therefore, we have a little bit more time. We don't have to finish all the business intelligence systems training by the day of go live. A next question that we often receive is, how many of those different roles do we require? So there is no answer per se, so that we could say you will need 10 local process experts or so. It depends, but we can give you some recommendations based on our lessons learned. The first thing to emphasize is we need to have this discussion by functional area. So what you can see here on the right-hand side is the breakdown of the functional areas that we have in scope of Umoja. So it's 11 functional areas, starting with source to acquire, logistics execution, funds and cost management, and so on. And we need to have this discussion by each of those areas, and we will talk you through those 11 areas in more detail this afternoon. Why do we need to do it by function areas? Because every function area has different challenges, so the complexity is different per function area, and also the number of end users. And these are two parameters that are very important to determine how many local process experts we will need. But starting off with process experts, so process experts are usually required in those areas that are mission critical. It's an area of change and innovation. The profiles of those people are usually high potential experts, and compared to the number of end users, we usually say like about 1%. So this is, it also depends, it doesn't always make sense to have it for all function areas. It depends to what extent you cover those function areas yourself or where you are being served by a service provider. In terms of business intelligence analysts, we think they are needed for those function areas where you have a high need for data analytics and fact-based decision support. So for instance, if you do a lot of conferences and you are interested in travel analysis and see how much did I spend on travel for this conference compared to that conference, how much did I spend on this airline compared to another airline. If you are interested in these kind of statistics, then you may want to nominate a business intelligence power user for travel. In terms of our recommendation, we think it may make sense to have 1 or 2 per function area for business intelligence. Local process experts, they are required if you have a large number of end users and if you expect a lot of questions from those end users. The profiles of the local process experts are experienced end users. The often local process experts are involved in those processes today, so they already have functional knowledge and they now learn how to do those functions in the new system. If it comes to numbers, our rough guideline would be about 5 to 10% of local process experts compared to the number of end users, but for sure this also depends on the geographic distribution of the end users. So if you have an office where you only have 2 users, most likely you will not need a local process expert. But if you have, let's say, 10 requisitioners in one office, then you may want to have at least all the 1 or 2 local process experts, because if those requisitioners have questions, then it may make sense to already have a more knowledgeable colleague in that office to provide fast support. So these are some guidelines. As I said, the key prerequisite usually is to have a good estimate of the user base by function area and by geography to make a good guess how many of those other roles you will need. Are there any questions on the different programs, numbers, profiles? Okay. There's one more slide, all the focusing on the support structure. As said, it's very important to have a good support structure in place after the day of go live, because if we don't have it, it can have a severe impact on your mandate delivery, and also it has an impact on our team, how we can proceed with further rollouts. If you have a question, it usually starts from right to the left. So the first the first contact usually are the local process experts. If they can't answer a question, they are being directed to the process experts of the entities. And in addition, we also have process experts in the areas of the process owners. So we have this multi-tier support structure, and only those questions that cannot be answered from those process experts will then be directed to the Umoja team. But theoretically, those questions should only be then technical fixes to the solution. So all the business questions should be handled by this support structure. We often also have a question to how to now nominate local process experts, and we fully understand that this is a constraint or a challenge how to free up capacity, because you also have your day-to-day operations. However, based on the lessons learned, again, we strongly recommend to invest in your Umoja before go live, because the more you invest now, the less you will suffer after go live. So it's we have this saying here: can we afford it or can we afford not to? So based on our experience, we really strongly recommend you to involve already the best people into this project and to be prepared for the day one, because it's just that much of change that will be initiated through your Umoja, so it's good to be prepared. Okay, just a few more key messages to wrap up this first part of the presentation. This chart here shows you how the deployment may have been perceived by peacekeeping. So we would like to share this with you, also to manage expectations. What you can see here, it's not a straight line, but we have here, it's called being two crisis, a pre-rollout crisis and a post-rollout crisis, or we often also call it the Valley of Tears. So cluster 3 right now might be very close to the bottom of this first Valley of Tears, because we only have 3.5 months left. We talked about the challenges that we still have in data conversion that needs to be finalized, particularly in the area of grants. User access mapping is still not finalized. We still have to do a lot of end-user training. So the next 3.5 months are really challenging in order to be ready for go-live. So therefore, there is a lot to be done. It will be a considerable effort, but hopefully by the time we go live, we will be more optimistic so that we can make it. As soon as you go live, you should expect a performance dip. So this is the lessons learned not only from peacekeeping, also from other organizations. So usually you should not expect business as usual at day one. Because as I said, you need to get used to this new way of working. If you have questions, you need to have a proper support structure and so on and so forth. So in terms of peacekeeping, we really had a big performance dip, because there were so many questions and issues. We had to send teams to the different missions in order to deal with the issues. We also created task force. So we tried then to mitigate those risks. However, we had significant efforts after go live. In that sense, we can now see peacekeeping operations is now on the way upward again. So we have managed to address most of those issues in the meantime, but just as a preparation for you, so you should also expect a performance dip in the first few weeks or months. So it depends how good the data quality and user access mapping is. So although you can influence the time of this performance dip, so it's hard to predict how long it will take until you will go over to this smooth transactions, but it's better to be prepared. So if you have a lot of critical business right after go live, just to be prepared that operations may not run as smooth as you are used to it. Yeah. Any questions to this picture and to these lessons learned? Okay, and another picture showing you what we would like to drive home here. So the first point in order to be successful with the deployment is understand what is coming. So this is the purpose also of today. By the end of today, hopefully you will have a good overview and understand what is coming. The second thing is to do all these activities, or what we call the homework, and to required in order to be ready for day one. And the next step is also then to be certain that your organization can cope after day two. So this refers to all the production support that we discussed earlier. It also refers to this example with the proper adoption of the solution, so really adopting this new way of working. And if you manage to do those three steps, then we think you are in a good way to go live. Two more slides, just as a summary, what we've covered this morning. I think a key takeaway is that this is not only a new system. Yes, it's also a new IT system, but I think the biggest part of this whole transformation, it's really a change management project. It will significantly change all the operations that we are used to today. Therefore, it's important to have properly staffed what we call deployment teams. So these are the teams that are pushing this deployment forward locally. We understand that there is a dilemma of getting ready for Umoja versus the day-to-day operations. So we need to have to deal with this trade-off. But I said we believe we should definitely not under-invest in getting ready for Umoja. Managing change with managers and staff. So for instance, we have this session today for managers, but we also would like to ask you to further spread this message, to talk to your teams. We give the same messages to the USGs, ASGs, director levels, that there are town hall meetings. We heard this morning there were already first divisions that all did their first training session. So this is definitely the way to go, and we would like to encourage you to do similar things like that. Where required, also to do one-to-one sessions with the staff, particularly in those areas where you expect a lot of change in the nature of the work. So it's definitely important to communicate as much as possible in order to ensure that everyone is on board for this transition to the new Umoja world. Understanding the pain points of harmonization. Jorin talked about this earlier when we said we now try to introduce and harmonize all these blue processes across all the different entities. As of today, those processes are managed in a very different way, and in the future, as we will all work on one system, it will be a far more harmonized way of doing business. There's a scorecard, and this scorecard tracks the progress in order to go live. So if you're interested, and we will share the link with you, there's a scorecard, and it shows you all the activities that are that have been accomplished or still need to be accomplished until the day of go live. So if you're interested what is green and red in your entity, you can have a look at this scorecard. There's also, we recommend to review today's legacy applications, systems and report. So for instance, if you are used to look at a certain report today, you should already think about how could this report look in the future, which data sources do you need, will you get this report out of Umoja, or how will you get this information. So it's good already to think ahead and think about this information so that you then can also get this information after go live. Management of remote offices, we already had a question in that direction about connectivity. This needs to be ensured, particularly as we do have employee self-service, so everyone needs to have access to the system in order to perform those tasks. It also relates to segregation of duties. So if you now have a very small office in the future, as Umoja is a geographic independent system, it's far easier also to ensure the segregation of duties, because you do not necessarily need to perform all the steps of a transaction in a small office, but you can do it globally. From a silo paradigm to an enterprise paradigm, this is again this example about this blue and green area, this tight-loose model that we discussed earlier. Collaboration with an office away from headquarters service centers. So here in the case of UNEP Habitat, the collaboration with UNON, as a lot of processes are changing, although this collaboration needs to be reviewed given the new options of the Umoja system. Employee and managerial self-service, this might be the biggest all the cultural change. It's not only that every one of us will get access to the system and become a user of this system. It also relates to the fact that we push far more trust and responsibility to every one of us. So as said, you will be able to enter transactions in the system, for instance, leave request or rental subsidy, and what you enter in the system can have a direct impact on payroll. For instance, in rental subsidy, there is no additional step of authorization. It will directly be included into your next payroll run. So in that sense, so there is far more trust towards the employee, but all the accountability. As Jürgen said, there will be audits and so on, so you still need to prove if there is an audit and verify that this information is correct. But the first assumption is what everyone puts into the system is correct, and we put a lot of trust towards every one of us. So this is also a big cultural change, that we have far less signatures and authorization and put more responsibility to the employee. Last but not least, we have the area of benefits. So the whole purpose of the Umoja project is to increase the transparency and also the efficiency of the organization. So therefore, the member states are all expecting benefits, and these are qualitative and quantitative benefits. So we all need to make sure to all realize the new opportunities that we can achieve based on this new system. Any question on the content that we've covered so far this morning? Yeah.
Hi. Sorry, my question is regarding the first point. So of reviewing what we have, systems we have now, and we might need in the future. And definitely we have a lot. I mean, I can think of, for example, project management system that we have. But I don't understand what our role is. I mean, isn't Umoja going to take that into its integrated system? Or if once I see that there is something that should be taken forward, what do I do?
Okay.
As UNEP, saying who owns this process of, making sure that it's reflected in the future?
So this process is not owned by Umoja, but by the local deployment teams, for instance, also in UNEP. So yesterday in the session, we also had discussions with Christophe Bouvier and Moses Tifula. So they are the organizers, and they also have a plan how they would like to deal with, in this case, with the PIM system, I guess. So usually the local deployment teams, they do a fit gap analysis, so they compare today's systems against the footprint of Umoja and see where the overlap is, which system can be replaced. For instance, I understand that here in Nairobi there is a leave request system which will be then replaced by Umoja because we have the same functionality, but there are all the functionalities that are not yet in Umoja, so those systems will be further exist. But this detailed analysis and the how this will work, this is being decided by the local entities and deployment teams, because those systems and reports, they are owned by the local entities and not by the Umoja team. So it's not up to us to make this decision, but it's the decision of the entities. And if you're interested in the further details, then please reach out to your local deployment team and see, okay, how will this then exactly happen in my case? Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah, so this refers back to the picture with this green and blue area. So this was the question we also had earlier. So what is the responsibility of the process owner and what is the responsibility of the head of department? So for all administrative support function processes, we go towards this matrix organization. So the process owners have been delegated the authority by the Secretary General that they define those processes across all entities. It means that they just say these are the processes and policies that have to be followed, but still every entity then decides who will perform this process. So the user access mapping is still being decided by the entity. And so in that sense, the heads of departments are still have the authority for their business, but just for the standard administrative-oriented processes, the central guidance in terms of how those processes should be performed will be done in an enterprise way, and this follows this enterprise paradigm. Yeah, so in that sense, the heads of department will still have the full flexibility when it comes to all mandate delivery processes. But if it comes to the processes that we will cover this afternoon, like procurement, human resources, there is a defined way for those processes, and all entities are then supposed to perform according to those specified processes. What we cannot do in the future anymore, as we all will work in one system, we cannot do a local configuration of this process, because this is the same process. As soon as you change the system and make an adjustment, let's say for UNEP or Habitat, this adjustment will affect all other entities as well. So in that sense, for all those processes that we cover in the afternoon, there is more in the future, this enterprise paradigm that all the entities will follow according to this process.
Sorry, the enterprise paradigm also covers the notion that in each duty station right now we have separate vendor databases, we have separate master data information that we collect. We'll move from these silos, from these independent databases into one enterprise corporate database that will have all the master data information, all the vendor database information in one enterprise system, so that everyone's working off the same master data. So that's also a paradigm shift from having and maintaining location-specific master data to maintaining and having an enterprise-wide master data.
There was a question, yeah?
I want to ask you whether you have any plan to actually have program or project level the units, because in UNEP, projects are quite often the kind of the binding units, the procurement and consultancies, staff, or many of the things, contributions that are tied within a project. Oh, and then also it's kind of upscaled, and you can analyze at the program level. And I think that's what we actually need. We cannot afford not to have that. So I don't know whether there is something that is considered, or you just leave it to the interface with the local system.
Yeah, so we will cover this in more detail. There is something, so you can manage projects in Umoja. So this is one of the function areas, grants and project management. We will not, in the current or in the version that we rolled it on the 1st of June, if it comes to the PIMS system, so we will not be able to cover all the functionalities that are in the PIMS system today, but at least the whole financial administration. So you can exactly track then how much did you spend on this project and sub-project, and which kind of expense categories. This can all be handled within Umoja. Any further questions? Yes, please.
It was a question actually posed by another colleague earlier about the dates for the blackout, the dates for the go live. And I think if you can give us some specific dates would be very useful, because we're getting conflicting messages from UNEP staff and what we heard this morning. And just so that we can then plan accordingly as well.
Yeah, so I think one thing is we definitely also, as a follow-up action, we need to ensure that those dates are also communicated again in a written form, so that, because we from New York, we think it's pretty clear and we send it, but I think we need to make sure that this is again being distributed to everyone. The 1st of June is the go-live date, and this is fixed, so it's the 1st of June when you will get access to the new Umoja system. And the blackout period was defined, and this has already just been communicated officially. It's the 10 business days before the 1st of June. So the 2 calendar weeks before the 1st of June. But as I said, we will try to push that this is also again communicated so that everyone has the same message, because not everyone attends today, and if there's confusion, this needs to be very clear. Yeah.
In follow-up
Yeah. So we got this question. This is also an important one. So as we, the main audience today is cluster 3. However, we also have a few colleagues for cluster 4, but this is also relevant to cluster 3 as well. So therefore, we would like to highlight this. When cluster 4 goes live on the 1st of November, there will also be a blackout period for cluster 4 for sure, but this also impacts cluster 3 to some extent. What does this mean? When we do the conversion from cluster 4, it will be most likely again those 10 business days for cluster 4 entities. So they will have to stop transacting in their legacy systems 10 days before. This does not apply already to cluster 3 because you don't work, by that time you will not work anymore in IMIS. However, we also have a certain number of days of downtime of the Umoja system itself. So this will not be the full 10 days, but perhaps 3-4 days or perhaps 1 week, where we will have again a blackout period for cluster 3 caused by the cluster 4 go live. The same applies now when we have this blackout period for cluster 3. It will also be a blackout period for cluster 1 and 2 because they already work in the system and we need to take the system at least for a few days off in order to bring in the new data and prepare it for the new solution to go live. So therefore, please be aware that there might be another few days, not the full 2 weeks, but another few days of blackout then end of October. Okay, if there are no further questions on the general topics, we proceed with the functional areas. One more slide before we go one by one through the functional areas. It's just important to highlight again this high integration of the system. All the function modules are in one system. It's one system across all different entities. So therefore, it's important about this high integration of the different function modules, because only if you understand this integration, you can really leverage the opportunities of the system. And although if you don't understand the integration, you can imagine if you do one mistake in this process chain, this whole mistakes will pass through the other function modules as well. And again, going back to lessons learned from peacekeeping, we had a lot of issues, and they most likely in most cases, they were found by the colleagues in financial accounting, but the root cause of those issues was far more upstream in the process. So therefore, we need to make sure that already early in the process, for instance, the requisition, when you do the travel request, that the data is entered correctly, because if it's not, then it may have an impact on the whole process chain. So therefore, when we also do training, we try to convey this message of this end-to-end process understanding that goes across different function areas. And this is not just one example that shows you, for instance, if you would like to buy a computer, how this process works in the future. So the first step is check funds availability. So that you can see the requisition in the future can automatically check if funds are available. So in the system, so there is no need for writing an email, getting a signature, or whatever. You can just check in the system if funds are available. So this is a funds management functionality. Then it goes to, then we will have a shopping cart, so you can select the computer out of a given catalog, and you can select the computer and put it into a shopping cart. Then it goes to procurement. Procurement checks if there is already a system contract for this type of computers, or if you need to buy a new computer for that one. As soon as then this computer is delivered, we have a logistics execution component. So the computer is being shipped. It's being analyzed if it's the same computer that has been requisitioned. So if there is a match, then it goes further to financial accounting. In financial accounting, you will have then entries on the general ledger and accounts payable, and then it goes to treasury, and the money is dispersed to the vendor. So you can see already in this simple example, we covered funds management, source to acquire, logistics execution, financial accounting, treasury. So we covered 5 of the 11 areas, and usually, typically, whenever you do an end-to-end process, you always have different functional modules being involved into those end-to-end processes, and therefore it's important to some extent all the others understand other functional modules because they will be then relevant upstream or downstream further in the process. But I said for the afternoon we will now go one by one through the functional areas and try to introduce you the new key changes in those areas so that you have a good feeling what is coming, what are the new opportunities in all those different areas. We will try to cover the first few areas now before lunch. I think the lunch break is planned for 1 o'clock, and then we continue with the remaining function areas after the lunch break.
Okay, thanks, Marcus. So we start with the functional areas. Just again to reiterate that this is not the format of session where we can take you and give you a visual look at the system and show you how the transaction operates in the system. That's for something that you're going to have to look at which applications or functional areas you want to go into more detail in and get that sort of training at the keystroke level and understand how the system, what it looks like. We have some demos later on that we'll show you around employee self-service and BI, so you get a visualization of the system itself. But for the other processes, what we're going to do is just tell you about what the differences are between how we operate now and how we'll operate under Umoja, so you get a sense of where the big changes lie and what it means for you as managers and what you need to do about it and how to be prepared for it. In the source to acquire area, source to acquire being requisitioning all the way through to purchase order, it covers requisitioning, creating a requisition, routing it through to the procurement division, getting a purchase order. It covers a process for low-value acquisition. So those are your direct purchase orders under $4,000 where you don't have to go through procurement and you get 3 quotations and you can process a low-value acquisition, and some elements of contract management, which more of it is in extension 2, but there's some functionality here. The important lessons right up front for you to know. There are a couple of things in the source to acquire, in particular requisitioning. The role of the person that has the authority to initiate a requisition in Umoja is called requisitioner. You have a requisitioner and you have approver, the person who approves the requisition. You'll have then a role called buyer, the person who takes the requisition and does the actual procurement. And you have a buyer approver who approves the purchase order to be issued out to the vendor. So those are the roles in the source to acquire area. People in your office need to be designated or mapped to the role requisitioner. Now you may procure goods currently, and you may have people who do requisitioning now. They may just send an email to the procurement division. They may write something on a piece of paper. They may do different ways in which people do requisitioning. In Umoja, it is a much more complex function. In Umoja, you have a requisitioner who needs to know, firstly, what material they are buying. And in order to understand what material you're buying, you need to know that every material record, anything that you buy in Umoja, has to be on the material master database. So it has to be an item that already exists in the material master database. If it does not exist in the material master database, it cannot be bought through a requisition. So if you're looking to buy this remote clicking device here, and you go to the material master database, you want to requisition one, you see it is not there. You've done the search, you can search the database, you see it's not there. You have to requisition, you have to ask for this item to be placed on the material master database. So you have an I need form that you'll fill out, send to the central master data management team. They will make sure that this item does not exist on the material master, and in a couple of hours they'll write back to you saying, yes, not on the material master, here's the code for it. So they will give it the code. That code means that anywhere in the global secretariat, if somebody wants to buy the same item, it is described in exactly the same way. That allows us to run reports that says how many of these items do we own, how many have we bought. If they were called different things, we will not be able to run reports of that nature. So that's why you need standardization, customization, standardization on the codification of material master. So very important, a requisitioner needs to know how to search the material master database and how to request a new material master record if it doesn't already exist. This also applies to services. So the requisitioner needs to know that. The requisitioner also needs to know what account is going to be charged for this purchase. So they need to put the account code in, the fund code in. Also very important, if you do not have budget against that code, that fund code, the requisition cannot be processed. So you can't go further if there's no budget in that account code. So there must be budget. If there's no budget, it will stop you. You're going to have to say, well, okay, I need to ask for redeployment of budget. I'm going to have to find some way to ensure that there's budget against that code for me to buy that item. Okay, so this makes requisitioning, or the person that is going to be mapped to the requisitioning role, an important decision. So when you're doing the role mapping for requisitioner, have this in mind, that the requisitioner under our current system and the requisitioner under Umoja are very different. Under Umoja, it's a much more complex role. So let's get into some of what the differences are between how we operate now and under Umoja. How we operate now is our procurement systems are separate from our financial systems. When you do anything in procurement, you've got to repeat the same thing in the IMIS to create the financial impact of it. So in Umoja, there's real-time integrated controls, validations throughout, and you have a budget availability check immediately. You have workflows and approvals that are built in through the system, so the system knows that if I create a requisition and Marcus is the approver for this requisition, in Marcus's inbox in Umoja, it'll say there's a requisition available for you to update. To approve. If somebody else is looking at the system, they can see the end-to-end supply chain and say, Uren's created this requisition for this item. It's sitting in Marcus's inbox waiting for approval. So you know where things are at all times. You know you have visibility through the supply chain. Currently, we have procurement offices, Nairobi, procurement office Geneva, procurement office New York, procurement offices in all our duty stations. Under Umoja, because all these procurement offices are working in the same system, when a requisition is created and the requisition is approved, the procurement office can make a decision and say, hey, you know what, the procurement office in Nairobi has more experience in dealing with this very technical item. I'm going to route this through to them and ask them to do the procurement for me. Because it's a technical specification, they understand who the vendors are in this market, and they can make the best procurement process for the organization. So you can leverage procurement officers throughout the organization when you're buying. So for a procurement office, a big advantage. The opportunity in visibility to operations. Previously, we didn't have visibility. You'd requisition something and you don't know thereafter where it was in the process. Under Umoja, you have end-to-end visibility of your supply chain. You know when something's been received. You know where it is sitting in the approval process. You know when a purchase order has been cut. And you have this in real time, so you can see information in real time. If you're a procurement office, the advantage for you is you can see all over the world how many people are buying what. And if you see different offices buying these monitors, for example, you can say, well, there's an opportunity here. If I can consolidate all of these monitors and get the best deal for the organization out of one or many different companies, or if it's a region, for Africa, I can buy this from an African-based company. If this is for Asia, I can buy it from an Asian-based company, and I can direct everyone to this to get the best best deal and negotiate the best price for the organization. So you start to get economies of scale out of the system for the procurement office. Vendor management has been very important. Currently, we have vendor databases in all of the different duty stations. Just for peacekeeping, we had 120,000 vendors in our legacy systems. So this is where you have a situation where, and we always use the example of IBM because I suppose that's the easiest one to use, but in one vendor database, you will have IBM. In another vendor database, it's I.B.M. In a third one, it will be International Business Machines. It's all different names. So even in the peacekeeping database, you had multiple descriptions of the same vendor, all duplicated. Just for the peacekeeping, cluster 1 and 2, we have managed to bring it down from 120,000 vendors to 17,000 unique vendors. Just taking out all the duplications and all the dirt and cleansing the system out. So you can see what the opportunities are there. Now you have access to these 17,000 unique vendors. When you go live on 1 June, you'll be seeing all those 17,000 vendors, and you will be seeing all those added to it, all those unique vendors that the Nairobi office deals with. So those will be added to the vendor master record. Between now and the 1st of June, the master data additions, including staff and materials, vendors will also be added to the system. So your local vendors that currently exist in IMIS will be cleansed and added to the vendor master record. All vendors need to come through UNGM, the UN Global Marketplace. So this is a common portal for all vendors to be registered in. There's some criteria that they need to meet in order to be registered with the UNGM. Once they get a contract with the UN, then they become a business partner. Then they drop into Umoja and become a business partner. But a prerequisite for anyone wanting to do business with the UN is you need to be registered in UN Global Marketplace. Now, I would understand for small organizations, small SMEs that you want to continue business with, when you have implementing partners that are very small organizations, we have to make sure that we cater for them as well. So for them, the procurement office has a vendor assistance facility where they will assist vendors, implementing partners, to register with UNGM. The criteria is fairly basic, so they can register, get into UNGM as quickly as possible. So one of the takeaways for you is to make sure that your current vendors, if they are on IMIS, no problem, they're going to be automatically transposed and added to Umoja. If they're not, they need to be registered with UNGM. So the earlier you start that process, the better for them. This just allows us to have one cleansed, easy-to-use vendor master database that we can run reports on. We can look at how much we are buying from vendors, where those vendors are, and be able to report on that, to reflect on that, make decisions, make planning decisions around our procurement. Another opportunity realized through Umoja is materials and service codification. I told you about the materials master database. This is another way in which we're standardizing across the organization the description and codification of materials and services. We use a codification system called UNSPSC. This is a standard codification system, so when you code a commodity, it's coded in a particular way, linked to what Marcus will talk about later, to the coding block. So it has certain indicators that will say this item is a equipment item, and therefore it needs to be treated in a particular way. If I requisition this item, it knows what to do with it in the financial records, to where to put it in the asset account or in the consumables account. So it knows how to treat this item, and there's no separate transaction required. In the For the material master, we've reduced or managed to clean that out quite considerably, and currently we have 45,000 materials and 1,000 services that are listed on the material master category. Obviously, when Cluster 3 and you and Nairobi and the other entities come online, your unique items get added to this, obviously cleaned before they get added to it. So we'll have more items and more unique items that you have in the database for you to requisition. The major opportunities going forward, you can add pictures. So against an item, you can put a picture, and so you can see what you're buying. The whole user experience in Source to Acquire is very much like online shopping. So a requisition in Umoja is called a shopping cart. You'll hear the term shopping cart. So when you go into the system, you search your material master record, you find the item you want, you click that, you put it into your shopping cart. And when you submit the shopping cart, you will then process this further into procurement, or if it's a contract that's also already available, you will draw down from that contract. So the user experience in Umoja is very much like online shopping. Contracts, important to know that you have access to global systems contracts. So if you want to buy an item that already there's a price negotiated and the UN has a systems contract for an item, the system will tell you there's a systems contract available. If it's only a contract available for Nairobi, it knows that you are ordering from Nairobi. It says there's a contract available in Nairobi for this item. You can draw down from the contract instead of going through a whole procurement process. So you have access to open contracts that have been pre-arranged, pre-negotiated by the procurement office for you. So this is a very powerful tool and will reduce the number of contracts and procurements that we have to do by making use of existing contracts. Any questions so far? Any concerns? Yes, please.
Thank you. My concern is about these procurement procedures. Yes, as a project manager and managing projects, the main bottleneck is the procurement issue. And if Umoja really facilitates expedition of this procurement of goods and services is very good. But one thing that from what I heard here is the question of this putting all the things to buy in a material master database.
Yes, yes.
Now that is the main challenge, because if we don't have all the goods that we want in this database, that means there is no procurement.
Yes.
But as you all know now, mostly we just deal with countries, and sometimes we really don't know what they need, what their expectation is, and then when it comes, that procurement, we will not find this in the database, and there is a lot of delay in delivery. So maybe in the longer term, maybe that could be possible, just to put all the things what we know. But if we really start this Umoja now by 2015, I'm afraid that there will be a lot of delay in implementation, because we will not be able, even as myself in my areas of expertise, I will not be able to exhaust all the needs and expectations from countries, particularly when it comes to scientific equipments. Thank you.
Okay, so on that, whatever items you've purchased previously and the items that you know already, like you say, those would be entered already onto the material master or transposed into the material master through the data conversion process. So you will already get those items that you've already previously purchased into that material master. The new items that you have not previously purchased are the ones that you have to ask for a material master record to be created. Now, the central master data maintenance team that works on this will start to get better at their turnaround times. I don't think you're going to find major delays in that respect, because it's a central team. All they want to make sure is this item that you want to buy, is it unique or does it already exist? If it's unique, then they will give you the item, the material master, and decide what the financial treatment of it. Is it a consumable? Is it an equipment? Is it an inventory? And they will ask a few questions about that. That, I don't think you're going to get major delays coming out of that process. So although you have to do that, it's not going to add a significant time to your timeline. In the end, what benefit it's going to give you is you're going to be able to run a report that says, for how many different projects have I bought this particular item for? And you'll be able to run reports because you know it's a commonly described item. If you don't have it commonly described, you won't know. You can't run reports of that nature. So there's a little bit of a trade-off. The Times, so far Peacekeeping are running it. They haven't raised an issue of delay in the request for material master items, but I think your point is taken. I don't know whether a service level agreement has been already established with the central master data team, but I can check that. But it's an issue. I don't think it's going to be a big enough issue to introduce delay into your procurement process.
Sorry, I have two questions with regard to procurement. The first one, that's really great that we have a unique system for UN secretariats. And as you mentioned, let's say UNON office in Nairobi has a great experience in procurement, and they have a big capacity. While, for instance, office in Vienna, they do not have that capacity. So we need to use the services of Nairobi offices. What about human resources? Like we can use the services of Nairobi office once for big procurement, twice, but we have a lot of projects in UNODC related to procurement and construction. Will it create a kind of precedent for increase of PSC rate, or once we face with a challenge when Nairobi or Vienna or Geneva office says that, sorry guys, but we do not have enough human resources for that. While we are the best in that area, but we simply do not have people to do it. How that part is?
Yeah, I think you'll always get into that situation. It is something that you have to work out with the procurement office. I can't say, I can tell you how the system works. I can't speak to how much capacity an office may have to be able to offer you that service. Mm-hmm. These procurement, it'll be an arrangement between procurement officers. Mm-hmm. So one procurement officer will say, I would like to redirect this procurement to another procurement office, and they'll be able to say, well, I have the capacity to deal with it. I don't have the capacity to deal with it. So I think that's something I won't be able to say how they will treat those capacity issues.
Okay, internal issue mostly.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the second one, with regard to, again, procurement, you have mentioned that there is one master database, right,
yes,
for all vendors. And
yes,
if we see that, let's say, Nairobi office has a contract, so Geneva may use that contract. And in the most of cases, like with LTA, there is a ceiling. So we sign a system contract for up to some amount. And there is a procurement plan. And definitely making the plan, we consider we have a forecast. And once, and UNON has that contract. And then UNODC appears with a big construction for a huge amount, which will just eat the half of the contract. That part.
Okay.
Thank you.
So points on the availability and the use of contracts. Firstly, the way contracts are made available or negotiated in this way is that the contract is done by the procurement division, so the NTE is set pretty high, so they know that people are going to be using this contract regularly. It will confine the contract to visibility in different areas, where sometimes it doesn't make sense to have a global contract. If somebody sitting in Geneva, it doesn't make sense for them to see a contract in Nairobi, because the cost of buying something out of Nairobi and transporting it all the way to Europe doesn't make commercial sense. So they will make available, or visibility to the contracts will be on a location basis. So when the procurement officer negotiates the contract and makes it a system contract that's available, they indicate whether this is going to be visible by which locations, in which areas, so that it makes procurement sense. It doesn't make sense for somebody in Geneva to buy something out of Nairobi if the cost of transportation is going to be higher. In terms of the NTE, the procurement division manages that. So it's not a contract if it goes into that area where it's a system contract that's available to everyone else. It's not an NTE that is going to be located, that will be restricted by your level of purchase. It's an NTE that's available to the system. So they will make decisions about how to set the NTE and how to change the NTE, so that you don't have to run into that situation where it's consumed by somebody with a big contract that's just going to take advantage of the fact that you've done all this work to create this purchase. Yeah?
Yep, no.
Sorry, you wanted to finish something on the same? Yeah? Please, at the back.
So how would you procure a meeting venue, whether it's a conference center or a hotel? We have a lot of cases where we have to have meetings outside of Nairobi and in other places where it's not hosted by any institution or government. And in that case, what we've done in the past is gone to procurement. They've asked us to initiate discussions with hotels. We get 3 offers, and then we write a report, and they then suggest which hotel or conference center to go with. So how would it work with the Umoja?
With Umoja, the offline process is you will still get 3 quotations, and I assume this is under $4,000. If the procurement is under $4,000, you will go into a direct procurement. So the individual in your office that has the role, low-value acquisitioner, it's a special role. So if they have the role low-value acquisitioner in the system, they will go in and put in the vendor that you've selected to host this or the premises that you want to use. They will put the vendor name in. That vendor needs to exist on the vendor master record, and you'll issue a direct purchase order to them. So it doesn't go to procurement at all. Direct procurement is managed by the local low-value acquisitioner, and your supervisor approves it, and you cut the purchase order and issue it directly to the vendor. But the 3 quotations before that, you will have to still do that process yourself. Sorry, again?
And in cases, I mean, we've just had a meeting that cost us $250,000.
Okay,
so
that will have to go through procurement. That will have to go through the normal procurement process, where they will look at the requisition and what you want, go out and source the right vendors for it, and cut the purchase order and proceed as if you were buying any other product that was over $200,000. So the procurement process is exactly the same. Please.
Thank you very much. I've looked at the agenda. I don't seem to see where we're going to discuss SSFAs. And
that's under grants.
Under grants?
Grants management, yeah.
Okay. Because why I'm wondering that is in approved project documents, we already have a list of partners and institutions with whom we have to sign the SSFAs.
Well,
so my confusion is whether we should tell them to go to the UN Global Marketplace and register, when some of these are actually government agencies.
If they're government agencies, they're already on the master database, because they give contributions and we get assessed contributions from them. So they're already a business partner in the UN. But if they're a particular government agency, that you deal with, there's a way to do that. And Marcus will talk about that under grants management. Those are implementing partners. So SSFAs are your implementing partners. I will talk about grants in and grants out. Yeah? Yes.
Yeah, sorry if maybe this one is not very, very much linked to the training, but in the issue related to the procurement, and you have mentioned some approved vendor, maybe in Nairobi or in any station. Given, for example, I have a meeting and I want to organize a meeting, am I looking for a vendor to whom I can contract? And maybe if I just see the information from Nairobi and knowing this, the environment, I know that maybe the vendor that they're having are not really the good one. So in terms of equity and justice, should I rely on it, or there's a way of really looking for the best, as you know that you can find best on the market?
Then again, it depends whether it's a low-value procurement or a procurement above $4,000. If it's a procurement above $4,000, the procurement office manages that. The procurement division manages the sourcing of vendors, and you can advise them on who the vendors are that you think don't provide a good service and those who provide a good service. If it's under $4,000, then you get 3 quotations from the vendors that you think provide a good service, and you process it through a direct procurement if it's under $4,000. Again, over $4,000, it has to go through the procurement division, and a purchase order has to be issued by the procurement division. But you can play a role in advising them on who the good vendors are and who the bad vendors are. Any further questions? Please.
Will the Umoja system allow for any flexibility with more esoteric needs? For example, if there is one vendor that sells your little laser pointer, can you also register a second vendor? For example, in the communications world, we would like to work with several different photo libraries. Yeah. But if a photo library has global reach and it's already registered, can we continue to add others?
Absolutely. All the vendor master data management is concerned about is that you don't duplicate the same vendor. So they're not going to tell you you can't deal with a particular vendor. They're not going to tell you, I don't think that you need to have that material on the material master record. All they want to make sure is that it's captured the right way, that it's not duplicated, that we can run reports that identify all the items and describe it the same way across the whole organization. That's all. That's their business. They're not going to second guess whether you need this particular material, whether you need that particular vendor. That's not their business.
Another concern is that if it's something that deals with creativity, whereas in the past we would have asked for a waiver, we're not allowed to do that any longer. So if we've got 3 different photo libraries in the material master database, we don't want to compare the 3 of them. We want to use that photo from that library because that's what we have to do. And we're putting in place right now a LTA with 10 libraries. Now in Umoja, would we still be required to get three different quotes on something that's unique?
No. So if it's under $4,000, you select the one that you want and you go into a direct procurement. If it's over $4,000, you tell the procurement office, this is the unique vendor that provides exactly what I need. It's like a sourcing without competition. So you do a sole sourcing, and the procurement process exists for that already. So it's not changing the rules. The procurement rules still exist.
Except that at UNEP, the Office for Operations has put a halt to that. There is no sole source. There is no waiver any longer. We have to go out and find the lowest bidder of these 3 if it's above $4,000, and it's very difficult to influence the outcome. If you want to work with Woody Allen, you have to put it out to 3 different people, and the lowest bidder wins. You can't control who you really want to work with.
Now, that's a local issue. We can take that up, and if the procurement process owner is going to drive a standardized process across the organization, then I think this comes into play about standardizing the way procurement will operate across the organization. So we'll take that point up. I wish we had asked for some co-leads from the various offices to be here so that these local questions could be answered. But we'll take it up with them. Any others? No. Okay, so source to acquire, just a quick summary. Consolidated vendor database for all Secretariat entities, better vendor monitoring, reporting, and identification of opportunities for negotiating with vendors. If you know that you're buying a lot of items from a particular vendor, now that you can see that, you can get into a better negotiation with them. Implementation of a Secretariat-wide material and service commodity codification system and a master data, material master record gives us a lot of opportunity also for reporting. Introducing a better experience for the end user in terms of online shopping and clicking through the material master in order to requisition an item is a much more user-friendly process. Your visibility that you have through the supply chain is highly emphasized throughout the Umoja. You get to see where an item is in the whole supply chain process. If you're a procurement office, you're seeing what's being bought and you're able to derive better economies of scale out of your purchasing. And you're able to leverage other procurement officers throughout the organization, throughout the global secretariat, to make the best use of procurement services, provided they have the human resources to do that for you. Logistics execution. This is our term for the part of the functionality under Umoja Foundation. It covers receiving. So it's all about receiving goods. In this area, we'll cover inbound processing, so receiving of goods, but there's functionality for transfer of goods between different offices. So within the Secretariat, you can transfer within offices. And we have functionality for warehousing and for inventory management. So the most important aspect for you to know is that in UNON and for UNEP and Habitat, you may want to decide how your receiving is performed. So in many cases, I know in New York, we're going to do receiving centrally. So there'll be one receiving center in New York, and I don't know what the plan is here to do, how to do it in Nairobi. But what will happen is you will get a receiving office as part of the central support services in New York. They will have a number of people designated with the role receiving user. So the item that you requisitioned and the purchase order was cut for that item now gets delivered to you. The receiving user picks up the purchase order and says, is this the same item that I'm receiving? And yes, it is the same item that I'm receiving. Then he processes the goods receipt. So you'll have a match between what was ordered and what was received based on the same material master record and description of the item. So it's really clear that you're receiving what you had ordered in the first place. What this facilitates as well is the processing of transactions in the financial part of it. So when you receive this, you ordered this pointer, you have received it now, and it knows that when you receive it, it's got to go into an equipment account because this has been classified in the material master as an equipment. So the financial transaction of receiving takes place automatically. It also has IPSAS implications. So the act of this transferring into the ownership of the UN is automatically done from an IPSAS perspective. So you get a IPSAS compliance through the receiving function. Previously, receiving had no financial implication. So somebody would receive a good, would look at the item and say, yeah, I think that's right, and they would take it in. Now there's a financial implication of receiving. This functionality covers movement of goods within the UN Secretariat. So you want one office to transfer goods to another office. You do that using the logistics function. The other point that I want to bring, I think that's important for you to know, is all the terminology that we use around logistics and materials in Umoja. You will hear the term materials. Materials refers to anything that the UN procures, plans, produces, transports, stores, or sells. So this is all one collective term called materials. A subset of materials are those materials that we buy for immediate consumption, stationary. You buy it and you expense it immediately. So if an item is coded in the material master record as being a consumable, it knows that this will be expensed immediately upon purchase. So you don't store it, you don't do anything with it, you just expense it because it's a consumable. Material can also be an inventory where you buy something for stock. You buy it to keep it in your inventory and then issue it out from your inventory. So there's also an implication of how you treat that, because you need to reflect that in your financial statements as well. Equipment is also material. Equipment is any material that you want to track, that you want to serialize and track. So if this is an item, it may cost $20, but this is an item that you classify as an equipment because you want to track it. When you receive it, you will print a barcode in the receiving center. They attach the barcode to it. They associate this equipment to either this room or to me as an individual. So using the HR master database, you associate this with me. So the equipment master knows that I have this equipment, it has a serial number. If it needs to be serviced, plant maintenance will ensure that it's serviced over a period of time. So this is a piece of equipment that will be managed in the equipment master and tracked throughout its useful life. Part of equipment is fixed assets. So if there's an item that's been designated as equipment and it for the Secretariat, for the financial statements, Volume 1 and 2, for those entities that fall into those financial statements, if an item reaches the threshold of $20,000, then it's put into fixed assets, because this is an item that you want to track, but you also want to depreciate over time and manage it financially in a different way. So fixed assets are items for IPSAS purposes that reach the threshold of $20,000. UNODC is not in Volume 1 and 2 of the financial statements. The threshold is $5,000. So anything reaching the level of $5,000 and above is capitalized. Just a little bit more on the functionality of the logistics execution solution. It has two parts to it. Inventory management takes care of all the movements of inventory. So all the financial aspects or the financial implications of moving goods, issuing goods, receiving goods, valuation of inventory. So it deals with the financial accounting and the financial postings related to inventory. Warehouse management is a non-financial system. Warehouse management just manages the physical space of your warehouse. So if you here in Nairobi decide that you have enough items of inventory that you want to store in a warehouse, and you want to designate items that when I receive this item and it's an inventory item and it needs to go into the warehouse, it'll say, okay, you need to put this in bin number 1234, so that when somebody requisitions the item and requests it to be issued from the warehouse, it will say this item can be picked from bin number 1234, and you'll find it there. So it manages where your inventory is stored within a warehouse, just the layout of that physical location. Just some stats so far, based on what we did in Cluster 1 and 2. We've done in excess of 130,000 goods receipt transactions in Umoja so far, just from Cluster 1 and 2, and very little issues with this functionality. not going to dwell on that too much longer. So logistics execution, some of the highlights is full integration between procurement and the receipt of materials. There's visibility on expected receipts, so you know when you're going to receive something. It queues it up for you. This is particularly relevant for big peacekeeping missions where they're receiving like earth-moving equipment or something like that, and they need to reserve forklifts or other people to bring this item in, and so they can plan around when they're going to receive something. The centralization of a receiving function is now clearly something that the organization is moving towards. Different units may do this differently. It facilitates process of transfer of materials between locations, so internally we can transfer things with much more ease. If you see diesel generators in a peacekeeping mission, and you can call the head of that mission and say, is this item is available? You're not using this. Can I transfer it into my stock? Obviously, there's a financial transaction that goes with that, but you can source and transfer items between locations using Umoja. You can forecast availability and demand of receipts based on your historical data. So as you receive and procure more, you're able to look back and run reports that say how much you've used in the past, or make some predictions about how much you're going to use in the future. And generally just improving your inventory control and bringing inventories down. The majority of the benefits that come out of Umoja is really in peacekeeping and reducing the level of inventories. Peacekeeping currently has, the last count was around in excess of $3 billion worth of inventory. And this was because each peacekeeping mission was maintaining its own inventory in its own mission. Now with visibility of inventory across the organization, you're able to reduce the levels of inventories so that you're buying with looking at all the information that's available rather than just buying based on what budget or need you have. Facilities and fixed assets management, really the two parts in the functionality here, real estate and fixed assets. Real estate, you won't use this functionality at all. I think this is mostly done behind the scenes. But I think the real big deal here, and the only reason we raise it is to just indicate that the real estate portfolio and lease details, for the first time in the history of the UN, has been put into one place. So we went through an enormous data conversion and data gathering collection process, and Mohammed must have played a key role in getting data for this region in this process. So for the first time, we have a global view on all the assets related to buildings and property that we didn't have before. So we could run, this is just some data that we pulled out, we could run reports, this is not really a report, we just pulled this data out. Sites, we have 1,722 total sites, and site has a particular connotation or particular description. But owned and leased buildings, 5,888 owned and leased buildings in the UN system, in the UN Secretariat. Leases, we have 1,769 leases, of which 1,428 where the UN has a lease with another organization, so we lease the building. In 331 cases, we lease out to other agencies or other entities. So the end is just to understand that for the first time we're able to gather this sort of global information just by putting all our portfolio of properties together. Fixed assets. The functionality in fixed assets covers property, plant and equipment and intangible assets. For you, the You should just understand when you're purchasing something what the threshold levels are for capitalization, and I spoke about this a little earlier. But for self-constructed assets, so assets that you are putting together under construction, $100,000 and above will be capitalized. For leasehold improvements and land and buildings, $100,000 and over will be capitalized. We spoke about integration. We have in the financial system a general ledger, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and a fixed asset subledger. These subledgers are all linked to the general ledger. This, again, just shows you the interrelationship between the fixed asset subledger and all the other modules in Umoja. So plant maintenance will manage how different parts of the equipment need to be serviced and maintained. Real estate is your database of your land and buildings portfolio, but it's also a fixed asset. The controlling module determines how costs are allocated through the various to the various departments for certain usage of assets. So there's a lot of interlinking in the system between financial accounting and the other modules. This slide just describes, once again, the reiterating fact that you enter an piece of information once and it exists throughout its life. So from the time of acquisition of an asset, through the depreciation, through the revision of its useful life, through the impairment, through the transfer or disposal of the asset, you still maintain the same record of the asset throughout. A key point here is in your finance office, you will have a person designated as the asset accounting user. So this person needs to be somebody who understands the IPSAS rules, somebody who understands accounting principles and the accounting effects of writing down equipment, capitalizing equipment, and how to treat capital assets under IPSAS. So this is a new role introduced both through Umoja and IPSAS, and somebody will be designated to this role and somebody who meets those requirements. So in addition to changing roles, Umoja is also introducing new roles. The role of the local and headquarters property survey boards still stay. Those will be outside of the system. They determine when an asset is declared to be impaired or written off, and once that decision is taken, then the process starts within Umoja. So those still remain and will still have a role to play. Let me go to what are fixed assets to be loaded into Umoja in 2015 for non-peacekeeping operations. For non-peacekeeping operations, the total acquisition value of assets that we will introduce into the system is a total of $3.4 billion. The total book value of assets in 2015 is $1.9 billion. So when we putting this data together, and as we converting the records and putting it into Umoja, this is the type of global data we're able to extract from the system. This is all current information out of the system. So very quickly, facilities and fixed assets management is a consistent and comprehensive documentation of the full real estate portfolio of the organization. It helps to maintain, track, and dispose of equipment, and it's integrating the whole system between the equipment records and the financial records. You have visibility to the receiving officer has visibility to when you want to transfer an equipment from one place to another. You can see the history, how it's been maintained, what the condition of the equipment is before you accept it. Nairobi here, I can see a power generator from out here. These power generators are a piece of equipment. It's an asset on the books, but you want to also keep this asset in prime condition, and you may want to service it every 3 months. Work orders are automatically created. If you say that that's equipment that needs to be serviced every 3 months, it creates a work order in the system that says that has to be serviced, reserve the labor hours that are required to service that, requisition the spare parts that you need to put onto that power generator in order to service it. So it prolongs and improves the quality and the life of your assets through proper servicing and maintenance. And of course, compliance with IPSAS and all the requirements for IPSAS. So those may be functionality that you're not going to be using often in your work, but it's important to know that that's functionality that's in the system and it's inherent in the system, and you can make use of it through your reporting or if you're interested in any way. The next big topic is grants and cost management and SSFAs, as it came up earlier, and how we manage that. It's now 10 to 1. I think we've caught up on some time, so maybe we break for lunch until 2 o'clock sharp. So we'll start at 2 o'clock sharp on a very, very important topic for you in your programs: costs and funds and cost management, and grants and project management. Thank you.